Timmy loved animals. He couldn't pass by a field with horses without stopping to stroke them and talk to them. He loved watching the lambs in the springtime, hopping and jumping around, bleating and baaing. He loved it when the calves would come in and suck his fingers over the gate, and he loved it even more when he saw someone slip over on a cowpat. They were best when they were all crusty on top and someone never knew they were still slippery underneath until they went flying. He did always make sure the person wasn't hurt. It wouldn't be nice to laugh if they were, but they always landed on soft grass. They were never hurt. Timmy lived in the countryside and loved eggs and baking, which you need a lot of eggs for. He'd been nagging his mum for ages about having some of their own hens. We would love them and cuddle them, and in turn they'd give us fresh eggs to eat, he'd say to his mum. They were lucky to live in an old farmhouse, so they had plenty of space for chickens to roam around. One day his mum said, "Timmy, do you still want some chickens? Jemima's got an incubator, a machine which keeps the eggs warm like mama hens do when they sit on them, while the baby chicks grow until they're ready to hatch. We can borrow it and hatch our own chicks. We'd have to look after them all the time though, even when they're eggs." Timmy couldn't believe it. He leapt around the room hollering in excitement. His very own chicks out of his very own eggs. The next day, Timmy and his mum put 10 eggs in the incubator. The mother hen would always make sure her eggs were turned lots of times each day, so we need to make sure that the incubator can make them move, said Jemima. We also need to keep the right temperature inside so we don't open it up very much. 10 days later, Jemima came and knocked at Timmy's door. "We need to candle the eggs," she said. "Candle the eggs?" frowned Timmy. "That's a very strange thing. What does it mean?" He followed Jemima to the incubator as she set up her equipment. "We're going to check if there's any life growing inside the eggs," Jemima said. Timmy watched as she washed her hands. Then she carefully opened the incubator and took out an egg. "Oh, be careful," Timmy squeaked. "They mustn't get cold." "It's okay," laughed Jemima. "If they were in the wild with a mother hen, she'd leave her eggs for a short time to go and get food and stretch her legs. They can survive a little while out of the heat. But you're right, they can't get really cold." Timmy breathed silently. He really wanted to look after his growing chicks. Jemima put a bright light underneath the egg and made the room very dark. Timmy gasped as he could see right inside the egg. There was something moving. "That's the tiny chick growing," Jemima said quietly as Timmy watched. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, a real live chick developing inside the egg that he watched every day. They looked inside another one, but there seemed to be absolutely nothing. "We'll leave this one for a few days more, but if there's still nothing inside, we'll have to take it away. Keeping an egg which doesn't have a chick growing inside is not a good idea. It might break over the other eggs, which can make the chicks inside them poorly." Timmy was sad to think some of his eggs may not have a chick growing inside, but he certainly wanted to look after and protect the ones he did have as much as he could. Over the next few days, Timmy came and sat and watched the eggs in the incubator as they slowly turned around. "I wish that they would hatch tomorrow. I can hardly wait to meet my new chicks. I know the one might not be growing, but the others will come out and be all fluffy and cuddly," he said to his mum. Mum sat next to him and watched the eggs too. "Timmy," she said, "we may have 10 eggs in the incubator. Because you shone the light inside, we know that one is not growing right. But that still doesn't mean that we'll get 9 healthy chicks hatching when the time comes." Timmy looked at his mum as she continued. Sometimes their body hasn't been able to develop in the right way inside the egg, and that makes it harder for them. Sometimes they might not get out of the egg at all. Sometimes they might be almost fully grown inside the egg, but it's just too much hard work for them and they're not strong enough. Sometimes the chicks don't develop well enough for them to survive once they're out of the egg. Timmy sat looking at his eggs with tears in his eyes. He sang to the eggs every day. He told them stories of what he'd done every day. He really loved these chicks, even though they'd not yet hatched, and he was sad to think that some might not live long or not even get out of their egg. "Mummy," he said in a quiet voice, "that makes me sad. Perhaps we can help the ones who are struggling to get out of the egg by cracking the shell for them and making it easier." Mum put her arm around Timmy. "You love our chicks so very much, don't you?" she said. "When the chicks hatch, they have to get out of the egg themselves. We can't help them. It's all part of their development. It's how they get stronger. If we help them, they may also be too weak. They've got to do it themselves." Timmy sat looking at his eggs as they slowly moved round and around. He'd been so excited about having 10 chicks all chirping around. Now he didn't know how many he would have at all. "If a weak one hatches, we will look after it, won't we?" "Of course we will," said Mum. "We'll keep it in its special incubator to keep it warm. We'll give it water and even some food for as long as it needs. We'll celebrate that we got to see and meet the chick. If it was in the wild, the mama hen would know that this chick was weak and would concentrate on the healthy ones. That chick would probably not survive. We don't know what will happen to our poorly chicks if we have some, but we'll love them and we'll look after them as long as they need us to. Timmy sat a long time after Mum had gone to make tea, watching the eggs slowly turning. He decided that although he didn't know what would happen, which eggs would hatch well, which might struggle and which might not hatch at all, and there was nothing he could do to help them, he'd continue to come and see the eggs. He'd continue to tell them what he'd done at school that day. He'd sing to them, and he'd hope that some of the chicks would come out healthily. He'd be sad if not all the eggs hatched, or if some of the chicks were too weak to survive. But he'd be forever thankful that he had this time to care for them and to do all that he could for them.